This is The Heart of the Matter, a journal of Jewish discovery. Welcome. I'm Aaron Cohen, executive editor of JUF News. The other day, I was taking a walk through the neighborhood with my daughter. It was a beautiful summer day, one of those still, quiet times with clear air when we just savored the world around us, the nature that we saw ever present in the trees and the flowers that people had planted. And it struck me that it's rare when we stop to really appreciate the fullness that moments within life can hold. Further, I thought about how the profound experiences of birth and death are the bookends that help us define those moments in between. But it seems that rarely do we take the time to fully savor and to sacralize, if you will, those profound moments that happen sometimes unexpectedly and very often in the seemingly most mundane times of life. I thought that we should really explore a little bit further the relationship between those bookends of life, the beginning of life and the end of life, because these are the times within the Jewish tradition where through ritual practice and liturgy and organized observances like the brit milah, the circumcision ceremony, or funeral traditions, we contextualize what's important to us. And the religion, or the wisdom tradition, if you will, provides a meaningful way to do that. With me today are two people whose professional lives focus on the beginning of life and the end of life. Dr. Carol Roberts Gerson spent most of her career as a pediatric surgeon before becoming a mohelet. Mohelet is the feminine version of the Hebrew word mohel, or moel, which many people have heard. And she's a person who now performs ritual circumcision, brit milah, which occurs on the 8th day after a baby is born. Similarly, for Jewish girls, there's a tradition of a baby naming ceremony to mark the entry into life of a Jewish girl, infant. Also with us is David Jacobson. Since 1997, when he founded Chicago Jewish Funerals, he's been the proprietor and director of that preeminent independent Jewish funeral service. Welcome to you both. Marvelous that you can be here with me today. We had discussed a concept that I think is so interesting, and that is this notion of kedusha or kadosh, of making sacred time out of events that are seminal in life experience. And when you think of the life cycle events that we all experience, birth and death, and between those, God willing, there are great simchas, celebrations like a bar, bat mitzvah, wedding. But these two are the defining moments of life. Carol, if you can tell me, what is it in particular when you do a circumcision ceremony, a brit milah, that feels sacred to you?
The time right after birth is a time of great emotional upheaval in so many ways. And in a brit milah ceremony, you are taking what is happening and putting it in a context that connects this family, this baby, these parents, to those who came before them and to those who will follow them. Mm-hmm. Life in now and even in the time of our ancestors could be a time of existential dread, of being a lone being in an infinite universe. Mm-hmm. Judaism is very good at taking the individual and placing each of us in a context of family, in a context of community, in a context of celebrating moments.
David, you had said something to me once that I found really interesting. You used the analogy of a ship journey. If Carol is dealing with the individual in the family at the beginning of that journey, you have this very heavy and awesome responsibility of the end of the journey. What was it that you told me about the notion of celebration? Because I thought it was profound,
well,
really.
I must admit, it's not my story. It's a rabbinic story, a rabbinic tale, if you will. But the ship that's going out to the sea is being celebrated, and everyone's excited for that ship to go out. like a birth. But the truth is, no one was by the ship coming back to the harbor, and that's the ship that did the journey. It brought its goods and its passengers safely back home. And when someone dies, the rabbis teach us that that's what happens, that the person now is coming home. It's lived its life, it performed its mitzvot, the person contributed to the community and to the world at large. And now it's time to say goodbye, but to come home and to welcome that ship back home.
Mm-hmm. Both these events are marked by ritual, they're marked by ceremony, they're marked by particular language. They can both be marked by tears. We associate tears of joy with birth. We associate different kinds of tears with death. Let's reflect a little bit, though, on language. Carol, what are some of the words, either from the liturgy or that you find particularly effective when you're doing a brit milah to mark that occasion? What's some of the language that you think helps peg that moment in meaning?
I use a lot of language of connection, of connecting the family to the past and the future. There are traditional Hebrew prayers. There's a traditional parents' blessing. There's a traditional blessing over the wine, a traditional prayer for healing, traditional blessing for happy occasions, and a priestly benediction to close the ceremony. And those are Hebrew prayers that are familiar to most, if not all, Jews. Mm-hmm. As far as the English language, though, we use language of connection. We connect ritual objects that belong to a grandparent or a parent or a great-grandparent. We talk about Elijah the prophet and how Elijah connects us to the past and to the future, to a vision of a messianic world, the kind of world we want our children to grow up in. Mm-hmm. So we use the language of Elijah, who also visits Jewish homes on Passover, but comes to every bris to herald the messianic age.
Uh-huh. Well, not everybody believes in the messianic age per se. I would imagine, David, that at the time of an individual's passing, those people who survive the person who's died have to rely on faith, and you probably encounter people who have tremendous faith and some measure of strong belief of what happens, and many people who are doubters and have no solid kind of spiritual underpinning. How do you deal with that bandwidth? And what language do you find yourself using in addition to the traditional prayers?
Well, I think that the concept of sanctity, of sacredness, no matter if you're religious or not, I think that's very important. You can be totally non-religious and still find things sacred. So the concept of people say the Kaddish, which mm-hmm. basically just means holy or mm-hmm. sacred. Mm-hmm. The people that prepare the deceased, the Chevra Kadisha, the holy society, or a sacred society that physically washes the body. Mm-hmm. Even the word for, the casket is called an aron. But what do we put the Torah in? The Bible, in the Aron HaKodesh, mm-hmm. a sacred container. And I think there are a lot of sacred moments in the funeral. I can't explain what's going to happen after the funeral, where the soul goes. I rely on the clergy to explain that to the families. But the terms of respect and dignity of how that deceased is going to be treated, who's the advocate for the dead? We are. Mm-hmm. And I'm proud to say that the deceased should be taken care of with dignity, with respect, in a place where it's clean, it's safe. And I'd like to think that we behave as if the family's watching us. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that I want to address that you mentioned earlier about the tears of joy and the tears of sadness is, as a father of 3, I found that when we were having babies, it was tears of scared, oh my God, what am I going to do? Uh-huh. And I've had relatives that died where there was tears of joy to say, the person's out of their misery. They're not in pain mm-hmm. anymore. And mm-hmm. especially with medicine today, a lot of people are mourned long before they died. Mm-hmm. And that the tears, I think, can go both ways on both of our occupations.